The Philadelphia Inquirer, NJN News Candidates Forum.
Hello, I'm Monica Melpass for Channel 6 Action News. Welcome to Rowan University, where for the next hour, the three major candidates for governor will be answering citizens' questions about the issues facing the state. The candidates are Governor Christy Whitman, the Republican incumbent, Middlesex County State Senator Jim McGreevey, the Democratic candidate, and Murray Sabrin, the Libertarian Party candidate. NJN's Kent Manahan will be moderating our forum, and Kent will explain the format now.
Monica, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. The panel who will be asking questions of the candidates today is part of the Philadelphia Inquirer Citizen Voices Project. And this group of South Jersey residents has been asked under the guidelines to develop a series of questions on issues that affect our state. There are 4 issues that they have pre-selected. They are education, growth and the environment, taxes and budget, and auto insurance. And the answers that the candidates will give and the length of time for each of the questions has been predetermined. Without any further ado, let's begin the questioning on the issue of education. I know everybody here is anxious. Will you give us your name, where you're from, and your question first from Mr. Sabrin?
My name is Jacqueline Massimo, and I'm from Cherry Hill. Mr. Sabrin, as a group, we believe that education is a public good, and we expect the next governor to stretch the limits of innovation. As governor, what educational innovations would you be willing to make, and which one would you make your priority?
As governor, I believe in education. I'm an educator virtually all my adult life. I believe we need to return control of education to parents, teachers, and students. That's the way I grew up in New York City, with an educational system that worked quite well. We need to be innovative and creative in the classroom. That's the job of teachers. Teachers are the skilled professionals who go into the classroom to educate our children. I believe we need to return the money that the state now collects to support a bureaucracy that doesn't educate anybody. We need to return the money back to the local school district. Those funds will be better used by people in the community across this state to give us much better education than we currently have. I believe that once this program is in place, we will see much higher standards. As an educator, I set very high standards in my classroom. Students know I'm tough, but I'm fair, and I go there to teach. That's why we need to return control to local districts and finally restore the educational standards that our students expect from us, but it can only be done so in a way that teachers and parents are in charge.
Mr. Sabrin, and as Senator McGreevey, your rebuttal, please.
Thank you. I think public education has to be the cornerstone of opportunity in New Jersey. 2 innovative undertakings I would take. One is between birth and 3 years of age, 90% of a child's brain development occurs. I'd like to invest less than 0.5% to Smart Start, to invest in children in those early years. And I also believe in full-day kindergarten. It provides a full measure of opportunity for our children.
Your response, Governor Whitman.
Well, Jacqueline, the most important legacy that a governor or an administration can leave is the education of its children. And whether we're talking about Bright Beginnings or School to Work or New Jersey Best, we are providing today more concentration and more money for education along with standards, core academic standards, so we know our children are getting the education they need from kindergarten right through to college. We want to make sure the skills they're learning are ones that are going to give them the skills they need to get a job in the 21st century.
Hi, your question is for Senator McGreevey. Give us your name and where you're from, please.
My name is Keisha Stevenson, and I'm a senior at Rowan University. The new core curriculum standards will be in place shortly. How would you measure whether a district is meeting the standards? And what would you do if those standards are not met statewide or in individual districts?
Thank you, Keisha. 2 independent reviews have judged New Jersey standards, one by the Fordham Foundation and a Harvard University professor, another by the AFT, to be among the worst standards in the nation. Indeed, we found New Jersey to have the lowest standards. I want to set the bar high. I want standards of excellence for our children. I want to ensure that our children are going to work hard and reach their greatest capacity. And I also believe we need behavioral standards. Children need to know the difference between right and wrong. Children need to know that character counts. Thirdly, I believe we need school-based results to ascertain and determine that our schools are achieving. Fourthly, I think we have to expand the amount of time we spend on core academic subjects. And lastly, an end to social promotion. We have to make sure that our students meet the full measure of that challenge. I want to require from us what we ought to be requiring from our children.
Governor Whitman, your response.
Well, Keisha, I know the senator likes to say that we're the worst, but that Education Weekly, with a grant from the Pew Foundation, just came out with a study of academic standards across the nation and said New Jersey got an A. We were the top 5 in the nation. We have high standards, and as part of the new core formula, what we can do is get into a school district early on to help them redirect their money to make sure it's going to the classroom. We will be the only state in the nation testing in the 4th, 8th, and 11th grades in 7 different areas, and we now can get in and make sure they work.
Mr. Sabrin, your rebuttal.
We are a multicultural, diverse society here in New Jersey. It seems to me that, given that fact, we should have standards based upon local standards, local community standards, rather than a top-down system that we currently have. What may work in one community may not necessarily work in another community. I want to empower parents and teachers to provide the education that they know their children need, not the bureaucrats in Trenton.
Your question, please, and who are you and where are you from?
My name is Richard Strobel, and I live in Cinnaminson.
And you have a question for Governor Whitman.
The income tax in New Jersey was begun to finance public education. New Jersey's progressive income tax rates were cut by 30%, putting pressure on other areas such as regressive property taxes. Isn't that going in the wrong direction?
Well, Richard, actually, absolutely no. And one thing you should know is we have more revenues now from income taxes than we did before we cut the income tax. But the most important thing for education is not to judge it by the amount of money we spend, but how well our children are educated. And the Supreme Court, in its decision, even recognized that we need to move off this dollar chase and go to what our kids are learning, what the standards are. In this administration, this budget, we put in over $500 million in new spending for education. And the first time in the history of this state, we have reached parity between special needs districts and every other, and the higher spending districts. So we have reached parity now. But that is a false goal. The real goal should be to ensure that we are providing economic opportunity, quality, and the funds and resources that are needed to reach those goals. And that's what we've done with our new core standards. That's what we've done with a $250 million technology initiative. Every school in the state of New Jersey, private, parochial, public, will be wired for the internet and distance learning by the year 2001.
Mr. Sabrin.
The point that you raise is very important. The income tax was a Trojan horse. It put more money into Trenton and less money in the local community. Now we have a bureaucracy in place that doesn't educate one child, that doesn't do anything to provide a quality education in the local community. We need to downsize this bureaucracy. In fact, we need to phase it out as quickly as possible so those funds can be used to deliver education in the classroom to students. All my adult life I've been studying this issue. Bureaucracies don't deliver services. People do. People at the local level. My goal.
Time is up. Mr. McGreevey.
What happened was the governor did the easy part. She cut the income tax by 1/3, but then increased state spending by $2 billion. The state share for educational funding fell from 42% to 37%. And who bears the burden? The middle-class property taxpayers. There is a tax crisis in New Jersey. It's a property tax crisis. And we need to target increased revenue expenditures to provide for that school district tax relief.
It's your turn now. You have a question for Mr. Sabrin. Tell us who you are and where you're from. And I have to ask our audience, please, to refrain from doing that. And I thank you. Your question, please.
My name is Melissa Byrne, and I'm a freshman at St. Joseph's University. Our group is concerned about the rapid escalation in the cost of higher education. Many of us know people who have dropped out of college because of it. What should the state do for middle-class people who can't afford college at the current prices, but don't qualify for state aid under the current criteria?
That's a very good question, since I am involved in higher education in the state of New Jersey. And my students work 20, 30, 40 hours a week in order to pay for their tuition and have living expenses and go to college at the same time. What we need is a system in place where people have more money. That means reducing taxes, since taxation is the biggest expenditure that an average family makes in this country. 40% of a family's income goes to federal, state, and local taxes. We can do our share in New Jersey by reducing taxes. That puts more money in people's pocket. By having more money in your pocket, that means you can do the things that you want. And we have to get away from the notion that everyone is entitled to a 4-year college education. It may take 6 years, it may take 7 years, it may take 8 years. I have students who've been going to school for 10 years to get a college education because they're dedicated and committed to getting that education. We all can't get what we want in life. I certainly didn't get it at the drop of a hat. We need to work hard, stay focused, stay on track, and you will get what you want in life.
Mr. McGreevey.
I believe that college is the gateway to opportunity. My dad, a Marine Corps drill instructor, went to college on the GI Bill. I went to school on the Higher Education Loan Program. But under this governor, tuition increases for state universities have been between 18–22%, community colleges up to 40%. I support a college income tax deduction to ensure that for a middle-class family, college is still within our grasp, and that promise of opportunity is still there for middle-class New Jersey.
Mrs. Whitman?
Melissa, in fact, funds to higher education have increased under this administration, and tuition increases are at about 6%. Under the previous administrations, they rose about 9%. And in fact, the first budget that Senator McGreevey voted for cut education, higher education funding significantly, the highest cut that we'd seen in a decade. We are continuing to put money in. We put a $50 million special initiative for high technology for our institutions of higher education, and we will continue to support them. Our TAG grants have increased by 30%. We're increasing our educational opportunity fund grants to ensure that everyone has that opportunity.
We want to give the people on the upper tier here a chance. Your name, where you're from, and your question is for Mr. McGreevey.
I'm Valerie Gladfelter from Moorestown. Our group believes the state should have a major role in funding education and an important role in standard setting. But we also realize these approaches could impact on local control, something we also value. What is the appropriate balance between state and local control in the areas of funding and standards?
Thank you, Valerie. I believe what needs to be done is, one, we need to set standards of excellence. We need to set that bar high to require our children to meet the full measure of opportunity. As I said also, behavioral standards. Our children need to know the difference between right and wrong. Thirdly, school-based performance standards to require schools to meet that measure. Also in terms of core academic subjects. Presently, the average New Jersey student spends approximately 42% of his or her time studying core academic subjects. We need to lengthen the amount of time studying core academic subjects. And also an end to social promotion. I believe that's essential. But where the state can provide assistance, I believe, is maintaining the level of state funding for education as opposed to the drop. And secondly, and as importantly, the state has a basic responsibility not to allow school districts to waste administrative excesses, to cut back on $250,000 of overtime.
Time is up.
And superintendent
Governor
buyouts.
Whitman, your response.
Valerie, you hit on a very good point, because it is absolutely true that the more the bigger percentage the state takes over, the more it is going to want to control. We now have a process in place with the core academic standards that gives an overarching academic standard with 600 indicators behind each one of those, but allows the classroom teacher to implement them in a way that fits the needs of that classroom. And let me just throw out a 7th grade indicator test. What would happen to the volume of a container if you doubled each of its dimensions? That's a 7th grade test.
And the time is
indicator.
up on that. And Mr. Sabrin.
The question of your premise, I believe, needs to be addressed, namely that the state provides education. Teachers provide education, parents provide education. All the state does is shuffle money around, recycles money from local taxpayers to the state, back to the school district at 60, 70 cents on the dollar. It's an extremely inefficient system. Teachers are the educators in our society. They're the ones that should have the freedom and the opportunity to teach children with the resources provided by local communities.
And that concludes our questioning segment on the issue of education. We're going to move now to the issue of budget and taxes and move over to this side of the room. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to come over on this side of the room. Pardon me. and move right in here and ask you, I think I better come around this way, and have you ask Senator McGreevey your question on the issue of budget and taxes.
Senator McGreevey.
Would you tell us who you are, please?
Elizabeth Lucas, Edgewater Park, New Jersey. As a group, we believe New Jersey's reliance on the property tax as a funding source for education leads to a number of problems, such as disparity between rich and poor districts, conflicts between parents and senior citizens over the school budget. Considering these factors, should all public education be funded through a broad statewide tax or taxes, not the property tax?
I appreciate your question. And as a mayor, and every mayor knows, Republican and Democrat, that there is a tax crisis in New Jersey. It's a property tax crisis. The problem is what has happened in New Jersey in the past 4 years is the governor cut the income tax by a third, but then increased state spending by $2 billion. Ultimately, the state share to municipalities, state aid, and also the school districts fell. The percentage for school districts fell from 42% to 37%. So who makes up the burden? We do, middle-class property taxpayers. And for the first time in this state's history, New Jersey has the highest property taxes in the nation. The governor says that's not her priority. I want to make it my priority. Middle-class families need to afford to live within their homes. Every year, state revenues grow between $750 and $900 million. I want to take a substantial chunk of those monies and dedicate it to school district property tax relief so we can afford to live within our homes.
I have to stop you and give Mrs. Whitman her rebuttal time.
Elizabeth, property taxes, as you know, are basically and finally and foremost a function of spending decisions at the local level, with the state having a great deal of responsibility in helping those districts. Today, state aid to localities is $29.8 billion. I hear the senator say that I've increased spending $2 billion. In one budget, his budget that he voted for under the Florio administration, he increased spending in 1 year more than I have in 4 budgets in 4 years. We're talking about discipline. There has to be the same discipline at the local level.
Mr. Sabrin.
Discipline is achieved through putting people in charge of their destiny. We don't have that in New Jersey. People are paying property taxes, sales tax, income taxes, excise taxes. Look at all the bills that you pay and look at all the taxes that you pay. If that money were kept in your pocket, people around the state would have enough money to pay for the things that they need. My goal is to return decision-making back to the people where it traditionally has belonged.
Your turn to ask Governor Whitman a question. And Governor Whitman, a question,
Governor,
and tell us
Steve Iwasco from Mount Ephraim in Camden County. The New Jersey Constitution requires a balanced budget. To us, this should mean paying current expenses in the current year. But some state monies collected for specific uses are not always used for those purposes. Case in point, various administrations have conducted raids on the unemployment insurance fund, pension funds, and others. Other gimmicks, such as bond issues, have been used to cover these manipulations. Shouldn't money earmarked for specific purposes be used as intended? And if not, why not?
If the legislature chooses, Steve, to dedicate a fund, then that's the law and that's what should happen with that fund, and you should not raid those funds. And that's why I'm very proud that the pension system today in the state of New Jersey is stronger than it's ever been. But to lock in every piece of funding to a specific concern would mean that if, in fact, you solve that problem, you then are locked in. You can't take that money and use it in other places for other priorities, because as this state moves forward, things get better. And you need to continue to have that flexibility. What we want to ensure is always that we are focused on discipline in spending our money for the priorities that we have at the top of our list, and that we're disciplined in our spending, and ensure that we get government out of every single person's pocket and out of making all the decisions that we see here in the state.
Mr. Sabrin.
A trust fund means that, trust. If money is earmarked for a particular trust fund, it should stay there. That's the purpose of the fund. It should not be used for any other purposes. If an attorney or an accountant did something like that, they would be in jail. It is unreasonable, and
we want to give everyone equal time here, so please refrain from that. Again, I ask you.
It is not reasonable for the state legislature or anyone in government to take money that's earmarked for a dedicated purpose. If money is in a transportation trust fund, it should be used only for transportation.
Time is up. Senator McGreevey.
What this governor did The governor cut the income tax by a third. She increased spending by $2 billion. The governor then went to the pension fund, took out $2.75 billion. The governor then went to Wall Street to borrow that money, except now we have to pay $7.5 billion of interest. That's $10 billion of debt, not for a road, not for a bridge, not for a school. Governor, fiscal responsibility is living within your means.
Time is up, and you have a question for Mr. Sabrin. Will you go ahead, please? Please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Your name, where you're from, and your
Mickey
question.
Harris, Moorestown.
And you have a question for Mr. Sabrin.
New Jersey has more than 1,000 municipalities and school districts, plus hundreds of other government entities. What practical incentives would you offer to those entities to consolidate services and/or regionalize them in order to reduce costs?
The power of the governor is very strong in the state because of the line item veto. I would make sure as governor that municipalities are living up to their constitutional responsibilities. But in order for them to do that, they need the funds to do that. The state is taking too much money from them. And therefore, you have all this money in Trenton, you have all these lobbyists in Trenton trying to get back a piece of that action. $17 billion a year and growing every single year. If the money stays in the local school district, the local government, that money will be used more wisely than the people in Trenton. And that's what we need to do, return decision-making back to the people. One of the famous slogans in the last 30 years is power to the people. I'm talking about financial power back to the people. And that can only be accomplished through lower taxes and less government spending.
Mr. McGreevey?
You know, part of the question on consolidation is how we spend our money. And my frustration is, particularly on our school districts, we spend more money than any state in the nation on education, but we're dead last as a percentage that gets into the classroom where our children are. We spend more than 50% over the national average on administrative overhead. We had a case recently of a superintendent in Middlesex County received $250,000 lump sum for unused sick time. And the buyouts. I believe we have to put an end to those excesses.
Time is up, Senator McGreevey. Governor Whitman.
Well, I couldn't agree more that we need to ensure that there is control at the local level, and that's precisely what we have done in encouraging in various funding formulas to encourage municipalities and school districts to share services, not to mandate regionalization from the state government level, because that's not what any of us want, but to encourage the intelligent use of those things. And I just have to refer back to something Senator McGreevey said. He talked about selling a road. You'd know more about that than I did, because you voted for a bond to sell a piece of road from the state government to a highway authority and use that money for operating expenses.
Time is up. We have covered education, budget, and taxes. We are now going to move on to the issue of growth and in the environment. Please tell us who you are, where you're from, and your question is for the governor.
Ernie Aponte from Mulligan Township, Atlantic County. And my question is, local interests often come into conflict over planning issues, such as greater allocation of water to developing communities versus allocations to established communities. How would you deal with planning for regional resources so the costs and benefits are fairly distributed?
Who is that for?
I'm sorry, it's for Governor Whitman.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's for me?
Yes.
As a governor who has taken on the state master plan as a serious tool for projected development and required every one of our departments to focus on how they implement their decisions relative to the master plan. It's a recognition that in this state, the most densely populated state in the nation, that what happens in one community does affect another community. But we need to balance things as well, and to keep, again, that local municipalities need to have their say in their quality of life. But I am very proud that under this administration, we have preserved more open space under the Green Acres program, over 80,000 acres, and more farmland space under the Farmland Preservation Program than ever before, and moved to things such as watershed-based management to ensure that we are providing everybody with clean water in a sensible way that protects our environment, but allows for the kind of growth that individual municipalities are going to want to see.
In keeping with our rotating order, Mr. Sabrin, you are next for the response.
I don't know any successful case of government planning for a society. We've just witnessed the greatest collapse of that system overseas. Why do we have to have it in New Jersey when we know that people do best planning for themselves, for their family, communities? If we maintain decision-making at the local level, the marketplace will take care of it. That's what the evidence shows throughout this nation. When we have people in charge of their destiny, when we have people in charge of their resources that they've earned, they will make the right decision. It's, after all, in their self-interest not to pollute their environment.
Your 30 seconds is up, and your 30 seconds begins, Senator.
Thank you. I support the state master plan, which was crafted by Governor Kane. It's about striking the right balance between our natural preserves and economic development. But there are issues that we need to be particularly mindful of, particularly in South Jersey, preserving our natural water supply, ensuring that there's available resources, but also planning long-term for infrastructure needs. Say, for example, the hookup of Route 55. So planning is about a thoughtful agenda to ensure our quality of life and the quality of our environment.
Your question, for Mary Sabrin, please tell us who you are, where you're from.
My name's Janine Tobias, and I'm a second-year law student at Rutgers University. And my group was skeptical that the free market and enlightened self-interest are enough to protect the environment. For example, just this month, the EPA issued a scathing report on the status of New Jersey watersheds. How would you balance the competitive interests of business and private property owners to meet the needs of our land, water, and air?
That's a very good question, and something that is a concern to all the citizens of the state, namely the protection of property rights. And you hit upon the most important issue here. When people have their property rights protected, the environment is cleaner. No one wants pollution on their property. No one wants to breathe pollution. So if we have a legal system in place that protects people's property rights, the pollution problem will be minimized tremendously, because people will have the opportunity to go to the courts to get an injunction to stop that polluter, to stop that smokestack. What we need is to preserve people's property rights throughout this state. We can do so if the EPA's mission is to protect property instead of overriding people's property rights throughout the state.
Senator McGreevey.
Thank you. I believe in a collaborative approach. Senator Dan Dalton and myself, I sponsored the pollution prevention bill that brought together business, labor, the environmental community, and reduced the amount of hazardous waste emissions by about 50%. The business community recognized it was smart business sense because you're reducing the liability for toxic chemicals, and the environmental community obviously wanted to preserve our environment. So it's about working together, developing shared goals, and working toward achieve those goals for the benefit of business and most particularly our environment.
Time is up, Governor.
Janine, this is the first administration that has undertaken an effort called the Green and the Gold, which is to engage in a planning process whereby businesses, environmentalists, and government agree on what the output should be from any particular business, and then gets out of the way and let that business do whatever they want to be competitive, as long as they don't exceed the standards that have been agreed to by everyone. That's the kind of forward and creative planning we have to have, because it does matter. You can't chase down a car down the road that you know is polluting. You can't get to the Ohio smokestack as an individual to sue them. That's why we have to have standards.
Hi. Who are you, where you're from, and you have a question for Senator McGreevey.
Yes, Mr. McGreevey. I'm Betty Jane Purnell from Woodbury, Gloucester County.
Hi, Bet.
South Jersey has many resources, including productive farmlands, pine barrens, wetlands, barrier islands, and the Delaware Bay. There are economic pressures for developing these areas that is inconsistent with preserving these resources. How would you deal with this conflict?
Thank you, Betty. Betty, as I said, South Jersey is a beautiful portion of our state, and it's about achieving the right balance. As Governor Kane established the master plan, it was about having a long-term vision so that we don't have unsprawled residential development and we don't pave over literally every acre of grassland. But it's also recognizing legitimate business needs, so it's striking that balance intelligently. Say, for example, in South Jersey, there's a critical question on water supply, so we have to plan to ensure that adequate water supply is available. We don't want to make mistakes that we've made in other areas. Say, for example, in Toms River, where the people in Toms River expanded a landfill, there was leachate, and the amount of children's incidence of cancer is among the highest. We have to ensure that there are environmental and health safeguards as we plan, so we strike the balance between development and our environment. Let's not just let mistakes happen. Let's plan with a vision to preserve that balance.
Your response, Governor Whitman.
Betty, I'm very pleased that over the course of the last 4 years, again, having already mentioned the amount of green acres and open space that we've preserved, that we have also seen our watersheds become cleaner. We've opened 8,000 more acres of shellfish beds because we have taken into account the fact that we have to plan intelligently. We have to monitor what's happening all across a watershed basin area. We have to ensure that we keep the proper open space. We have to put our money behind preserving those areas that will allow us to do it naturally instead of putting in high-cost cleanup operations that are artificial.
Mr. Sabrin?
Protecting the environment would be a top priority in my administration for a very simple reason. Somebody's property would be despoiled. And that's the purpose of state government, to protect life, liberty, and property. It states right there in the Constitution. What we need is to have laws based upon good science as opposed to junk science. And my administration would use good science to make environmental laws, not junk science.
All right. The next question, please, for Governor Whitman.
Thank you. My name is Bill Ritzler from Pittman here in Gloucester County. The State Development and Redevelopment Plan, commonly known as the State Master Plan, calls for development to be channeled into urban and older communities where infrastructure is already in place while preserving open space in other areas. However, higher urban taxes work against these objectives, directing investment out of cities and into open space. What will you do to resolve this contradiction and put teeth into the master plan?
Well, Bill, actually, we've already initiated a number of different programs to help channel development towards our inner cities where there's existing infrastructure. Our Business Employment Incentive Program, which has already been responsible for over 20,000 jobs in just 2.5 years, is challenged to the inner city. You get to participate in the program if you only create 25 new jobs, whereas any other place in the state it's 75 new jobs. We also have been very aggressive working with the Department of Environmental Protection and putting together legislation to attack brownfields, because those are sites that are sitting unused in our urban centers that can be developed. They can be cleaned up to a level that would allow them to be used for industrial use, and then we can actually see some development in our inner cities and some economic gain. We also have been looking at a number of different programs through our Urban Coordinating Council, again, to channel, to channel our resources into encouraging development within our inner cities.
Mr. Sabrin.
Whenever we have to depend upon government to do things for us, it's going to be more expensive and more inefficient. The private sector's job is to provide jobs, build communities, build businesses, and they make a profit at it. The government, when it does something, takes a loss, and who has to pay for it? The taxpayer, who had no input in the decision-making process other than voting for the legislators who may support this legislation. So what I believe we need to free up our economies, free up the inner cities from the rules and regulations that have stifled economic development in those areas, and businesses would return.
Senator McGreevey, your rebuttal.
Bill, the basic problem is all across New Jersey, we literally have hundreds of thousands of acres of former factory sites that are literally abandoned because it's cheaper to pay the property taxes than to undertake the expensive part of cleaning it up. The first thing is to target private capital investment to clean up those brownfield sites. Secondly, we have to make it worthwhile. I support a commercial tax abatement to encourage businesses to locate within our urban areas. And thirdly, an earned income tax credit to provide incentives to business to offer job opportunities.
Time is up. You have a question about growth in the environment for Mary Sabrin.
My name is James E. Dobbs, live in Camden, New Jersey. Mr. Sabrin, every 4 years we hear about plans to revitalize cities, and by so doing preserve open space from development, yet sprawl continues. What action do you propose to encourage revitalization of New Jersey urban league, thus reducing redevelopment pressure on environmental sensitive areas?
Environmental sensitive areas, who owns them? If it's owned by private individuals, they should be protected because no one wants to see their environment spoiled. If the government owns them, then we have a real problem because who's accountable for these areas? We need to strike a nice balance between the interests of the private sector and protecting the environment that is open to the public. What we need to do in the state of New Jersey is to enforce the laws that are already on the books. We don't need more laws, more bureaucrats, making it very difficult for companies to relocate to New Jersey. There are companies that will not come into the state because of some of these environmental regulations that are currently in place. We need to look at them, we need to reevaluate them, we need to see which ones make sense and which ones don't make sense. By doing so, we will bring more jobs into the inner city, more jobs where they're needed. And by being the governor, I will have the opportunity to work with the business community since I've been working with them for many years at the college level.
Senator McGreevey?
Yes. In Woodbridge, I formed a private-public partnership with business. I think the secret is cleaning up these former factory sites, providing a financial incentive. It's always going to be cheaper to build out in the middle of a grassy field than an industrial site. So we have to improve the bottom line. I mean, businesses aren't going to come to the cities because they're the little sisters of the poor. We have to provide financial incentives. And the best social welfare program in the world is a job. We have to provide a financial incentive with a holding tax to provide for job opportunities.
Time is up.
For
Senator
our citizens.
McGreevey. Governor Whitman, your rebuttal.
James, we obviously have to continue the policies that we have already started in encouraging and directing businesses to look at our inner cities as places for job locations. I'm very pleased that our unemployment rate is down to 5.4% from a high of 9.4%, and it's even down in our inner cities. But it's not down as much as we want or as much as we need. And this state is not going to succeed if our cities are failing. We have to have a commitment to our cities. We have to keep that commitment and see the kinds of changes that we are already starting to see expand and grow opportunities for everyone.
We are moving right along, and we are going to move right along on the issue now of auto insurance. Hi, your question is for Mr. Sabrin.
Hi, my name is Adam Jaffe. I'm a sophomore at Rowan University. The candidate's auto insurance proposals struck the citizens group mostly as tinkering with a flawed system. What we'd like to see are bold proposals for major restructuring aimed at guaranteeing universal coverage at an affordable price. Why don't your plans achieve that?
Auto insurance could be fixed the first day I'm in office. In January, I guess it's 18th of next year. We need a free, open, competitive market. Free enterprise in the insurance industry works. It works in homeowners insurance, it works in life insurance. People are knocking down on your door to sell you those policies, but they're not knocking on your door to sell you auto insurance. Why? We have a captive market. We have compulsory insurance and no fault. By eliminating those two elements of our insurance program here in the state, you will be in charge. You will tell the auto insurance companies what policies you would like to have to cover your needs. It's called freedom. It's called free enterprise. It's getting the government out of an area they have no business in. And as governor, I will make sure we will have the freest auto insurance industry in this state. And that will put you in charge and give you lower auto insurance rates, at least 30 to 50% lower than there is today.
Your turn for a response, Mr. McGreevey.
The basic problem with auto insurance in the state of New Jersey is whose side is the governor on? I've set forth a plan for a mandatory 10% rollback. $160 of every $1,000 we spend today is fraud. We ought to be prosecuting fraud, not paying for it. And I also believe in a public advocate. The governor granted 11 rate increases. There were two people in the room, the insurance companies and the Department of Insurance. And you know what happened? We lost every time. We need a public advocate to represent our interests.
Governor Whitman, your opportunity for response. Please.
Adam, there is clearly need for more choice, but one of the things, and I've heard Senator McGreevey say this before, there were 11 rate increases because the law required that the insurance companies earn a profit, a law that he sponsored, did that. But let me just say that every one of those increases granted was less than what was requested, and for every one that was granted, 2 were denied. This administration is very much on the side of the ratepayer, and the only people that are going to benefit from what Senator McGreevey is proposing are lawyers, because what he's proposing is unconstitutional, and we just have lawyers fight it.
Governor Whitman, and hi. You have a question for Mr. McGreevey.
Hi, my name's Kathy Reagan. I'm a senior here at Rowan University. My question's for Mr. McGreevey. None of the candidates give much emphasis to citizen voice on auto insurance reform. What will you do to give citizens a real say within the reform and in the setting of rates and policies? And how will you cater to the needs of the citizens rather than to special interest groups?
I believe in citizen involvement, particularly when this governor abolished the public advocate. The basic perspective is, whose side are we on, and is there balance in the system? What happened in those last 11 increases, there was no one representing the public. That's why I believe in the public advocate. And we also need to be attacking fraud. Clearly, if we're spending $160 out of every $1,000, we ought to be prosecuting fraud, not paying for it. Thirdly, I'd take lawyers out of the arbitration system, allow professional arbiters to determine what is fair and just. But the bottom line comes down to, when the governor talks about 11 rate increases, Governor, on the day before you announced your election year freeze, you authorized a 12th increase. A 12th increase that you didn't tell to the public, you didn't tell to the press. What this state needs is a governor who's on our side.
Governor, you have a chance to respond. Again, Senator, I think it is a cruel hoax, and people expect more of their governor than someone who will propose something that they know to be unconstitutional. And then also, and I must take you up on this, on your ads you say, as governor, I will go after fraud and I will take the licenses away of people who engage in fraud professionals. That bill I signed June 30th, you voted against it. You talk about taking fraud out of the system, you voted against it. Mr. Sabrin.
As you can see, neither of my opponents have the answer.
Your time begins now.
The answer is very simple. Putting you in charge of your auto insurance guarantees you lower rates. Putting you in charge of all the purchases you make puts you in charge of your purchases in the marketplace. What we need is a free and open competitive market. I can't believe here we are in 1997 and we're still debating whether the government should micromanage an industry. It's failed all over the world, and yet we persist in having this in New Jersey. It baffles me to no end. Under my plan, when I'm governor, come 1998, your insurance rates will be down. That's a guarantee, so remember that on November 4th.
And you have a question for Governor Whitman.
My name is Bill Hampton. I'm from Marlton, Burlington County. Governor Whitman, as citizens, we understand that fraud, abuse, and manipulation of the auto insurance claims process by drivers, lawyers, and others lead to higher premiums. As governor, what will you do to correct this problem?
Well, actually, in fact, we've already taken the first steps on that. I have signed 9 pieces of legislation since 1994 dealing with auto insurance. One of them makes it easier for us to get at the books of the insurance companies. But just this spring, I signed legislation that stopped the insurance companies' ability to have an automatic rate increase every July 1, and stopped their ability to put surcharges on your license, stopped their ability to drop good drivers for no particular reason, increase the number of fraud investigators to the highest number we've ever had, give us the ability to fine insurance companies up to $25,000 each and every time that they fail to report fraud to us, and gave us the ability to take away the licenses for people who engage in fraud. That is a good start. Unfortunately, my opponent voted against most of those bills, but that is a very good start. We need to continue to build on that, and that is why I have a bill before the legislature now that's been there since March that would give drivers the ability, if they change nothing, they keep the same premiums and same coverage they have now, their rates would drop 10%. But if they want a real change, they could get up to 25.
And Mr. Sabrin, you have the first response.
Again, we're going back to micromanaging an industry. Fraud has to be combated by the industry itself, not the government. Fraud will be prosecuted by the government, but fraud itself has to be combated by the industry. What we need is to put you back in charge of your auto needs, auto insurance needs. That's called free and open competition. Right now we don't have it. The governor and the senator expect they will manage this industry better than the industry itself. The industry is not calling for deregulation. I am. Why? Because it means there won't be any more guaranteed profits for them. Right now they have a system where their profits are guaranteed by the state.
Senator McGreevey.
I support a fraud prosecutor. The last year of the previous administration, there was $7.3 million in fines. This past year, $2.5 million in fines. We're not prosecuting fraud, we're paying for it. When the governor criticizes my claim, Governor Cahill had a 15% rollback in 1973, and I'll do it in 1998. The point is that over the past 4 years, the governor's granted 12 increases. We're spending $1 billion more, while auto insurance companies have doubled their profits.
Time is up.
How many families have
Mr.
doubled their
McGreevey.
income?
You'll be addressing Mary Sabrin. Could you give us your question?
I'm Donna Lawrence from Cherry Hill, Camden County. Mr. Sabrin, many claim that regulation of the insurance industry contributes to reduced competition and the high cost of auto insurance. There was agreement in our citizen voice deliberations that too much deregulation could also drive up the costs. What measures would you recommend to maintain a healthy business environment for insurance companies, while at the same time guaranteeing fair and honest insurance practices for New Jersey consumers?
Since we had the current system installed around 20 years ago, companies have left the state. If it's so good in New Jersey to write auto insurance policies, why are companies leaving the state? GEICO writes insurance policies in every state except two, New Jersey and Massachusetts, because of the no-fault system. We need to bring back companies who are efficient, who root out fraud, and put you back in the driver's seat regarding your insurance needs. We have a system today which is totally dominated by government and the industry, and you are left out of this decision-making process. We need to bring you back in the decision-making process. That's called deregulation. That's called an open and competitive market. In every state where we have this in place, rates are much lower than they are in New Jersey. Forget about the fraud and abuse and all that. That takes place all over the country. We have something unique in New Jersey. It's called heavy government regulation. Under my administration, regulation will be minimal, if at all, in this industry, and the industry will have to cater to you. Isn't that what you want as a consumer? The industry catering to you, calling you up, offering you policies, and you decide which policies to take.
Your time is first, Senator McGreevey.
The problem here is, I believe insurance companies have a right to make a fair return. They've doubled their profits in the past 4 years. They've literally doubled their profits. How many middle-class families in New Jersey have doubled their income in the past 4 years? I believe we have to attack fraud. That's important. That's $160 of that every $1,000 bill. We also have to do market survey analysis to see where insurance companies are gouging. And we also need a public advocate to represent our interest. We just can't be having 12 rate increases behind a closed door.
Time is up.
Donna, one thing we can't have is continued expansion of government. And my opponent there, every time you ask him a question, it's more government. An elected auto insurance commissioner, which I certainly don't think is going to take the insurance industry's influence out of it. And I worry about what Mr. Sabrin says. While my proposal does provide more choice and allow voters, allow premium holders to have more options, allow them to have more options, his program would allow insurance companies to have a total free rein. And what would happen is we would see the premium holders get truly gouged.
Time is up,
There
Governor
need to be
Whitman.
regulations.
The first question now for Senator McGreevey.
I'm Carolyn Huggins, Burlington Township. It is believed that 20 to 30% of all New Jersey drivers do not have auto insurance, even though it's mandatory. Understanding if everyone paid for auto insurance, the cost to all drivers would be reduced. What specific steps would you take to eliminate the uninsured driver in New Jersey? Great question.
First part is we need to provide for computer tracking. 12 other states have it, where insurance companies and the Division of Motor Vehicles have computer tracking. So you just can't go to the local DMV and say you have your insurance. It's going to be tracked. So if you stop paying after that first quarter or first half, then the insurance company notifies DMV and you lose your license, you lose your right to drive. But part of the problem, I believe, is also about the affordability of insurance. And it comes down to a basic question, whose side are we on? I believe that we need to provide for structural change. I believe we need to have a public advocate. We just can't have the insurance companies in the room. We need someone representing our interests. And the amount of fraud just continues to increase and increase. Most states prosecute their fraud. The citizens of the state of New Jersey shouldn't be expected to pay for it.
Governor Whitman, your response.
Carolyn, the most important thing to get at drivers who are driving uninsured today is offering them insurance policies that they can afford, that don't cost more than their car costs. We have got to get these rates down to where they're affordable. That's why the proposal that I have before the legislature would give auto drivers the ability to drop their rates up to 25%. Computer tracking is a great idea. We're already moving on that. We're already doing that and getting it into working with a computer base between the Department of Banking and Insurance along with the Department of Motor Vehicles to ensure that we do track where people are driving without rate.
Mr. Sabrin.
There is currently a bill in the legislature by a member of, that's written by a member of Governor Whitman's own party. She does not support it. I've read it. It makes sense to me. It calls for an open and competitive market. It makes sure that uninsured drivers will pay something into a pool that in case they get into an accident, there's money available to pay the claims. This is a program I think we should implement in 1998. So when I'm governor, I will ask the senator in charge of that bill to propose it again and thereby give people an opportunity to be in charge once again of their auto insurance needs.
And we are quickly closing in on the time frame today, so we are going to ask you now to make your closing statements. We will have each of you go down the line, beginning with Senator McGreevey. You are first.
Thank you. I was born in Jersey City, New Jersey, raised in Carteret. My dad's a Marine Corps drill instructor and mother's a nurse. Grew up in a middle-class neighborhood, and those are the families that I represent. Now, over the past 4 years, we've had a strong national economy. Certain states have used it as an opportunity to lower property taxes and raise educational excellence. Not in New Jersey. We all know the litany. We have the highest auto insurance rates in the nation. We have the highest property taxes in the nation. Now we have $10 billion worth of debt. 80% of workers have lost in terms of real income. And our educational standards have been found to be the worst in the nation. What's up should be down, what's down should be up. I want to tackle these questions. On property taxes, every year state revenues grow between $750 and $900 million. I want to dedicate a chunk of those monies to school district tax relief so we can afford to live within our homes. On auto insurance, I have a plan for a mandated 10% rollback, and I'll accomplish it just as Governor Cahill did in 1973 with a fraud prosecutor, a public advocate. And also, most importantly, government needs to live within its means. $10 billion of borrowing. And what I believe is the cornerstone is educational excellence. Our children need to have standards of excellence so they can achieve their best. We need a governor with the right values, the right priorities. I ask for your consideration this first Tuesday in November.
Governor Whitman, you are next in the lineup.
Thank you. My time doesn't start till I stop.
Your time begins, please.
First, I want to thank the sponsors of this debate for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. 4 years ago, the people of the state of New Jersey gave me a job to do. They said, cut taxes, cut government spending, restore jobs, get our education system educating our children, go after crime, and break the back of welfare. It was a big job, but we did it. We have cut government spending to a 50-year low, cut taxes 14 times. More people are working today in the state of New Jersey than ever in our history. We have world-class academic standards, and crime is at a 23-year low. Our welfare rates are down 31%. With the same determination that we put at those issues, we need to now to go after property taxes and auto insurance. And I promise you that in a second Whitman administration, it will be that same level of energy and focus. We have done a lot. We have made progress in those areas, but we can do better. I want a New Jersey that everyone is proud to call home. Proud because they know they can raise their families and pay for themselves with dignity because they have good paying jobs. Proud because they know their children get a world-class education. They know they can afford the car they need to get to and from work, and property taxes are under control. I want a state that is going to lead the nation in showing what you can do when people get together and work together. We accomplished a lot in the last 3.5 years. With your help and support and your vote on November 4th, we can continue this progress and not turn the clock back.
Mr. Sabrin, your mic is on. Mr. Sabrin, quickly,
I'd like to
please
thank
begin.
the New Jersey Network and the Philadelphia Inquirer for inviting me today. I'm the first third-party candidate in the history of New Jersey to participate in such an event. We need to phase out the sales and income tax. New Jersey lived quite well without the state income tax, without the state sales tax. There was tremendous prosperity when we didn't have those taxes, which put more money in the pockets of the bureaucrats in Trenton to decide things that you should be deciding at the local level. What we need in New Jersey is more freedom. The state flag talks about liberty and prosperity. Under my administration, we will have more liberty and more prosperity for all the people. We need to return educational decision-making back to parents and not in Trenton. We need to return the monies that they're now paying in the state income tax to people so they can decide how much they want to spend on their children's education. We need to have good environmental laws in the state based upon good science. Not junk science, such as the auto emission testing scheme, which beginning next February, if you fail twice, will take your car off the road if it's earlier than 1993. We need to have a free and competitive open insurance industry. That will put you in charge, giving you lower rates, just as your long-distance telephone rates have gone down because of deregulation. That's my guarantee and pledge to the people of New Jersey, a new prosperity based upon freedom, liberty, and prosperity.
And that concludes our closed closing statements, I'd like to thank Governor Whitman, Mary Sabrin, and Senator McGreevey for participating and for your thoughtful answers to our very thoughtful questions from all of our citizens here today. And our thanks to Rowan University as well. We hope you are better informed as a result of this format today. Monica?
All right, thanks, Ken. And that does conclude this Candidates Forum today. Now, this program will be rebroadcast tomorrow night at 5 p.m. on WPVI Channel 6, as well as on NJN tomorrow night at 7 p.m. If you have any questions about the Inquirer's Citizen Voices project, you can reach it via the internet at Philadelphia Online, www.phillynews.com. And of course, if you have any questions about the election itself, you can call the New Jersey League of Women Voters at the number on your screen, 1-800-792-VOTE. I'm Monica Melpass for Channel 6 Action News, and thank you so much for joining us.